Breaking news in Formula One: Lewis Hamilton leaves Ferrari and is set to return to Mercedes imminently. This is probably the first time you're hearing about this news, so I urge you to stay until the end before talking about it with your friends, because every detail matters. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. When the dust settled over Melbourne and the last mechanics rolled their gear into freight containers, the Formula One world collectively exhaled, believing the season had begun its familiar rhythm. Fans were still dissecting tire compounds, DRS zones, and radio messages from the Australian Grand Prix, fully expecting a quiet build-up to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Analysts were preparing deep dives into Ferrari's promising pace, McLaren's upgrades, and whether Red Bull's dominance could be challenged. Simulator sessions were booked, drivers were scheduled for media rounds, and social media was calm. But beneath the surface, something massive was brewing. Something no one, absolutely no one, saw coming. And then, like lightning striking dry grass, the silence was shattered. Lewis Hamilton is back at Mercedes. Not in 2025. Not after a season of waiting. Not after some farewell tour with Ferrari. He is back right now. Back in silver. Back in that garage. And he's racing in Jeddah this weekend. Not testing. Not visiting. Not watching. Racing. At first, the world thought it was fake news. A clickbait headline. A cruel April Fool's joke posted too early. But as hours passed, confirmations started rolling in. Journalists went radio silent, either under strict NDAs or scrambling to verify what seemed impossible. Social media exploded. Team insiders refused to comment. And the paddock? The paddock descended into stunned chaos. But how did this happen? How did the man who made headlines for committing to Ferrari, a move hailed as historic, emotional, and even spiritual, pull a full 180 in less than a month? How did one of the most anticipated driver transfers of the decade implode before even turning a wheel? The answer is not simple. It's scandalous. It's raw. And it involves betrayal, humiliation, politics, and a single moment that set the entire F1 structure ablaze. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. It happened in the shadows of the Australian Grand Prix. In a place the public never sees. The upper floor of the Mercedes hospitality suite at Albert Park, a sanctuary of leather sofas, mood lighting, and hushed conversations about money, influence, and the future of the sport. This was not a place for pit strategies or tire compounds. This was where deals were born. Where alliances were tested. Where the powerful flexed quietly. Toto Wolff, poised and immaculately dressed, was mingling with VIPs, team stakeholders, high-level FIA representatives, and select media moguls. At his side was Susie Wolff, intelligent, fearless, composed. A woman who has gone from racer to executive, earning her position not through marriage, but through relentless work, vision, and poise. She wasn't just Toto's wife, she was a respected power player in her own right, shaping the sport's future from within its governance. And then George Russell arrived. There was no dramatic entrance. No paparazzi flashes. Just a confident young man in a custom suit, walking with the swagger of someone who just nailed a qualifying session and believed he was entering a new era of personal dominance. He wasn't just the talented kid anymore. He was the guy. Or so he thought. He accepted a drink, made a few jokes, and mingled. But then, in a moment that now lives in F1 infamy, George made a fatal mistake. He leaned casually on a marble pillar, looked directly at Toto, and delivered a line that changed the course of the 2025 season, and quite possibly his career. Maybe if your wife stopped trying to run the FIA like a damn catwalk, the sport wouldn't be such a circus. The room didn't just go silent. It froze. You could feel the air being sucked out. Glasses paused mid-sip. Conversations cut off mid-word. A Ferrari executive subtly stepped backward, not wanting to be caught in the crossfire. Susie's expression turned from warmth to ice in milliseconds. Shock, disbelief, and restrained fury behind her eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence screamed louder than any reply. Toto didn't raise his voice. Didn't scold. Didn't move. But those who were present say the look on his face was unforgettable, stone, steel-controlled rage. A look that said, "You've just made the worst mistake of your life." What happened next is being pieced together from whispers, leaks, and careful phrases in cryptic emails. But what's clear is that within hours, everything changed. That single remark triggered a seismic fallout behind closed doors. Toto Wolff left the paddock that evening, flying back to Monaco. Toto followed the next morning. Mercedes held an unplanned emergency board meeting, virtually, then in person. Internal memos circulated. Department heads were pulled from marketing, HR, PR, and legal. This wasn't a PR problem. This was a leadership crisis. Subscribe just to stay tuned for the Formula One news no one else explains to you. And in Monte Carlo, Lewis Hamilton, already uneasy about the optics of his Ferrari move, already hearing murmurs from fans questioning whether he was being used more for image than performance, picked up the phone. It was Susie. They spoke for nearly an hour. What many didn't know until now is that Hamilton had inserted a unique clause into his Ferrari contract, one that allowed him to terminate the agreement without penalty under a breach of ethical environment clause tied to FIA conduct and sport governance. It sounded vague when he signed it. Too abstract to be real. Too niche to be activated. Until now. Within 48 hours, the clause was triggered. Legal teams moved with surgical speed. Ferrari was blindsided. The mood in Maranello was described by insiders as horrified disbelief. Fred Vasseur was reportedly seen slamming a laptop shut during a Zoom call. Enrico Cardile threatened to resign on the spot. Press releases were drafted, deleted, rewritten. Ultimately, they issued a cold two-line statement. We acknowledge the mutual termination of contractual arrangements with Lewis Hamilton. No further comment. And Mercedes? They went into war mode. A jet was dispatched to Monaco to pick up Hamilton. His engineers, many of whom never fully emotionally disconnected from their GOAT, were notified. Brackley lit up like Christmas. His seat was refitted. New race gear was prepared. Physiotherapists were flown ahead. Hamilton would be in the car by Thursday. George Russell, meanwhile, was asked, firmly and officially, not to attend any press briefings. An internal disciplinary hearing was scheduled. Behind the scenes, Mercedes has already begun evaluating driver options for 2026. The name Andrea Kimi Antonelli has now entered the conversation seriously. Ocon's name has resurfaced. Even Lando Norris is suddenly not so locked in at McLaren anymore. The fans are in disbelief. The media is scrambling. The grid is stunned. Hamilton's return isn't a reunion, it's a reckoning. A man scorned. A legend returning not to retire quietly, but to rewrite the ending on his terms. And he's not smiling. He's not doing press tours. He's not promoting NFTs. He's here to win. The paddock energy in Jeddah is different. Tense. Electric. The other drivers are walking on eggshells. Red Bull doesn't know whether to laugh or panic. Ferrari looks like a ghost ship. And Mercedes? They're either about to ascend or implode, and no one knows which. This is no longer the 2025 season we thought we were getting. This is a new timeline. A fracture in reality. A shakeup that makes silly season look like a calm afternoon. And it's only round 2. The air inside the Mercedes garage had already felt heavy all weekend, thick with pressure, laced with something unspoken. But no one expected what came next. Not the engineers buried in telemetry. Not the mechanics double-checking torque specs. Not the interns clutching clipboards, watching legends pace past them. Within moments, that usual rhythm of high-performance precision came to a grinding, invisible halt. Toto Wolff was moving. Not walking. Moving, with purpose. With the kind of focused, slow-burning fury that doesn't announce itself with noise, but with silence so loud it drowns out every engine, every radio, every heartbeat. He cut through the garage like a blade through fog, eyes locked on George Russell, who had just finished a light-hearted exchange with a few team members. Laughs had been shared, shoulders nudged. But whatever was said in that exchange, it went one step too far. One word too far. One name too far. Toto reached George. He didn't raise a finger. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't need to. He placed one hand, heavy, commanding, on George's shoulder. The contact wasn't violent, but it wasn't friendly either. It was a gesture that stopped George mid-sentence. Every conversation around them died instantly. You could hear the soft click of cameras turning. The subtle shift of mechanics trying to look busy, but watching out of the corner of their eyes. Toto leaned in. His voice was so calm, it was terrifying. "You will never speak about my wife again. Not now. Not ever." There was no tremble. No emotion. Just a cold, surgical delivery that froze George's blood. He blinked, opened his mouth, trying to reverse what had just happened. It was a joke, just banter, he offered, the words tumbling out awkwardly, like a kid trying to talk his way out of detention. But Toto didn't respond. He didn't blink. He didn't move. It wasn't anger on his face. It was disappointment. And worse, resolve. The look in Toto's eyes made it clear, this wasn't a private scolding. This was a final judgment. A silent verdict. The moment when George Russell, Mercedes' golden boy, promising heir to the Silver Arrows, became expendable. The ripple effect was immediate. The media didn't see the whole exchange, but they caught just enough to know something seismic had occurred. The footage was blurry, the audio incomplete, but the energy was unmistakable. By the next morning, the Mercedes factory in Brackley felt like it had been dipped in ice. Team briefings were abruptly cancelled. Strategy meetings, rescheduled indefinitely. Toto's schedule? Erased from internal calendars. His office? Locked from the inside. The shades pulled down. Not a single member of staff, from C-suite to catering, dared knock on his door. But one call was made. Just one. To Lewis Hamilton. Not through a manager. Not through PR. Toto picked up his private line, one few people even knew existed, and dialed directly. No hesitation. No script. And on the other end, in Italy, a phone rang. What most of the world didn't know, what no one outside of 4 key individuals even suspected, was that when Lewis signed his historic contract with Ferrari, there was a hidden clause buried deep within the pages. A clause written in such vague, cryptic language that even the most meticulous analysts had overlooked it. It was referred to, quietly and privately, as the Golden Clause. This clause was no ordinary opt-out condition. It was a custom-built legal loophole, designed by Mercedes' elite legal team and negotiated in total secrecy by Toto himself. It allowed Lewis Hamilton to walk away from Ferrari at any point before the first official Grand Prix of the 2025 season. No penalties. No lawsuits. No PR disasters. But there was one condition. He could only return to Mercedes. No Red Bull. No Aston Martin. No sabbatical. No Formula E. Just Mercedes. Ferrari had agreed to it because they thought it was ceremonial. A gesture. A symbol of respect. They believed Lewis would never activate it. After all, he had called Ferrari the dream. He had posted heartfelt messages about Enzo's legacy, kissed the badge, embraced the Tifosi, posed with Elkann and Vasseur like he was born to wear red. They bought into the theater. But Toto had written the script. Months before the Russell friction became public, long before the media started picking up the tension between the Mercedes garage walls, Toto had sensed it. He saw the signs, the subtle rift, the body language shift, the slight edge in debriefs. He knew Lewis was never fully at peace with George. And he knew George wasn't fully in control of himself. Toto had kept that clause hidden like a nuclear key. And now, the code had been entered. Back in his office, in the dead silence of Brackley, Toto didn't pace. He didn't hesitate. He simply said into the phone, "It's time." And on the other end, Lewis didn't flinch. He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't bring up contracts or media implications or even logistics. He just responded, quiet but powerful, "I was waiting for your call." Behind closed doors, moves were made. Flights booked. Lawyers engaged. In Italy, at Maranello, the first whispers began. Lewis had missed a simulator session. His assistant cancelled a press interview. Ferrari staff noticed his tone shift. Suddenly, the man who was supposed to be their savior had a distant look in his eye, like someone packing mentally before the physical departure begins. Back in Brackley, preparations began. Office spaces cleared. A new garage nameplate dusted off. A helmet design from the past, quietly brought out of storage. Because Lewis Hamilton wasn't just returning. He was returning with a purpose. And this time, he wasn't coming back to finish a story. He was coming back to rewrite it entirely. When Toto Wolff finally made the call to Lewis Hamilton after the explosive fallout from George Russell's latest on-track debacle, no one in the Mercedes camp expected what would come next. It wasn't a quick catch-up. It wasn't damage control. It wasn't even about clarifying roles. That call became the single most consequential phone conversation in recent Formula One history. What began as a tense, emotionally charged dialogue between two titans of the sport turned into a 4-hour and 32-minute marathon that reshaped the landscape of the grid overnight. The call wasn't scheduled. It wasn't filtered through PR advisors. Toto didn't alert the team. He didn't run it through lawyers. It was instinct, desperation, rage, passion, and above all, unfinished business. On the other end of the line, Lewis Hamilton didn't answer like a Ferrari driver under contract. He answered like a warrior who had been watching his legacy be rewritten without his consent. Insiders say the conversation swung between painful honesty, raw emotion, tactical flashbacks, and philosophical reflections on what they had built together. The dynasty, the records, the trust, and the heartbreak of Abu Dhabi 2021 that still, to this day, stings like an open wound. Toto reportedly didn't hold anything back. He admitted the mistakes, the favoritism, the internal chaos that had quietly metastasized ever since the team's downfall began. George Russell, once the bright hope of Mercedes' future, was now seen internally as a wild card, a liability, a ticking time bomb wrapped in talent and ego. The final straw had snapped. And then Toto said it. A sentence that will be etched into the walls of Brackley for decades. George is out. I want you back. I want you in that car. In Jeddah. Not in 2026. Not next month. Next week. On the other end, Lewis reportedly went silent. Not because he was shocked, but because a fire had just been relit. Ferrari, for all its red glamour, had already started to feel like a museum. Beautiful, polished, but cold. Strategic innovation had taken a back seat to marketing spectacle. Meetings focused more on hashtags than horsepower. And while the headlines shouted about a new golden age, Lewis had begun to sense he was being used more as a symbol than a competitor. Toto didn't have to sell it. He just had to offer the truth. Mercedes wasn't finished. It had simply forgotten who it was. Then, after nearly 5 minutes of silence, Hamilton responded. His tone was calm, focused, lethal. Make it happen. That was all he said. And suddenly, the floodgates burst open. Within 30 minutes, legal teams in London, Stuttgart, and Maranello were thrust into chaos. Ferrari's senior legal counsel was reportedly pulled out of a gala event mid-speech. Phone calls turned into shouting matches. John Elkann, chairman of Ferrari, personally attempted to reach Lewis 5 times between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. local time. Fred Vasseur allegedly smashed a coffee mug against the wall in a fit of rage, accusing his own team of failing to spot the legal escape clause that now seemed tailor-made for this very scenario. Because buried deep in the original Ferrari-Hamilton agreement, page 71 of 114, according to one anonymous source, was a clause so specific it bordered on legendary. Known internally as the legacy clause, it allowed Hamilton to terminate the contract immediately, without penalties or restrictions, if the team's actions were deemed to compromise his long-term reputation or pursuit of an 8th title. Mercedes had found it. Ferrari had signed it. There was no loophole. No time to react. The trap had been triggered, and there was no way out. By Sunday evening, Lewis Hamilton boarded a private jet from an undisclosed location in Italy. The plane was arranged through an offshore holding company to avoid media detection. It landed outside London just after midnight. No airport photos. No social media breadcrumbs. Total blackout. Meanwhile, the FIA was quietly briefed. For the first time in F1 history, a non-injury-related mid-season transfer between top-tier teams was about to be approved. Every rulebook protocol was stress-tested, revised, and cleared. The process that normally takes weeks was accelerated to mere hours. Back at Brackley, the factory didn't sleep. The Mercedes-AMG Petronas team lit up like a battlefield command center. Departments that had gone quiet since the Silver Arrow's fall from grace were suddenly alive with energy. Engineers pulled double shifts. Mechanics reconfigured cockpit specs. Branding was rewritten. Race suits, gloves, boots, all reissued and shipped overnight. Even Lewis's custom steering wheel had to be rebuilt from scratch, with his ergonomic specs from 2023 data retrieved and implemented in under 36 hours. Hamilton wasn't coming back for nostalgia. He was returning for revenge. George Russell, meanwhile, was called into a closed-door meeting. He wasn't offered a press conference. No support statement was prepared. There was no social media farewell. According to sources, his response was stunned silence. He had been the heir apparent. Now he was sidelined indefinitely, pending internal evaluation. A few within Mercedes' upper ranks had reportedly pushed to cut ties months earlier, citing growing tensions, toxic competitiveness, and media missteps. The crash was just the final spark. But Mercedes wasn't done making moves. Within hours, team executives reached out to the management of Andrea Kimi Antonelli, the Italian phenom dominating the F2 scene at only 17 years old. Conversations are already underway about a fast-tracked entry into F1. But Mercedes also holds another card, Mick Schumacher, long viewed as a loyal reserve and potential redemption story. The idea currently gaining traction? A shared seat program. One driver for technical circuits, the other for high-speed tracks, something never attempted in the hybrid era. Radical. Risky. Potentially revolutionary. Across the paddock, panic spread like wildfire. Ferrari cancelled all press interviews. Red Bull insiders were reportedly amused but alarmed. McLaren issued a no comment when asked if they'd been briefed. Sponsors began renegotiating ad placements mid-season. Journalists scrambled to Jeddah, where hotel prices spiked 200% overnight. Even Netflix's Drive to Survive redirected its production crew on a red-eye flight to Saudi Arabia to begin filming what could be the most iconic storyline in the show's history. This isn't just a comeback. It's a cinematic plotline unfolding in real time. Hamilton. Back in the car. Back in black and silver. Not as a farewell tour. Not as a marketing tool. But as the driver with a mission. To reclaim the destiny that was ripped away under the lights of Yas Marina in 2021. The title fight has just been rewritten. Not with points. With fury. And Jeddah? Jeddah is no longer just another night race on the calendar. It's about to become a battleground. The king is back. The storm is here. And Formula One will never be the same. The moment the official statement dropped, everything changed. Not just in the Formula One world, but across sports, entertainment, media, and beyond. It wasn't just a headline. It wasn't just a return. It was a collision of timelines, past and future, revenge and redemption, smashing into the present moment with such overwhelming force that even the most seasoned journalists were left speechless. Phones across the world buzzed simultaneously. Group chats blew up. Comment sections turned into war zones. Reddit threads multiplied like wildfire, each one filled with unverified insider leaks, frame-by-frame image analyses, decoded GPS data from Jeddah, and wild speculation about meetings in private jets, coded Instagram captions, and encrypted team radio messages. Within minutes, the internet was consumed by a digital earthquake. TikTok was flooded with stitched reaction videos. Some fans literally burst into tears. Others were caught on live streams pacing nervously in their rooms, trying to process what this all meant. One girl from Madrid reportedly fainted mid-reaction. A Brazilian fan made national news for screaming so loudly upon hearing the announcement that their neighbor thought there had been a break-in and called the police. X, formerly Twitter, reached activity levels typically reserved for international crises. The hashtags were relentless. Hashtag Hamilton returns, hashtag Russell collapse, hashtag the Silver Revolution, hashtag Toto strikes back, hashtag 8 incoming, and hashtag this is personal all trended simultaneously. Instagram Reels featured Hamilton's greatest moments, spliced together with dramatic music, cinematic transitions, black and white footage, and captions like you forgot who he was. But now he's here to remind you. And it wasn't just F1 fans who lost their minds. The entire world felt this. Sports influencers outside the paddock started commenting. NBA players posted cryptic emojis. Music artists started resharing old images of Lewis in his iconic silver fireproofs. Beyoncé's official stylist followed the Mercedes team account. Rihanna liked a photo of Lewis stepping out of a blacked-out SUV. Drake posted a single-word story, legacy. The ripple effect of this return wasn't just big, it was generational. Then the veterans came out. Nico Rosberg, always watching from the shadows, dropped a picture of his 2016 championship trophy next to a photo of him and Lewis on the podium with the caption, "Unfinished business never stays buried forever." Jenson Button gave an emergency Sky Sports interview, visibly shaken. "This is not a comeback. This is a statement." This is Lewis saying, "You thought I was done? I was just waiting for the right moment to rewrite the ending." Even Sebastian Vettel, the philosophical soul of F1, made his voice heard. When the heart of a champion starts beating again, the rest of the grid better listen. Because the silence is over. Now, as dawn breaks over Jeddah, the air in the paddock is almost unbearable. It's not tension. It's not anticipation. It's something heavier. Something historical. The kind of pressure that makes history feel like it's bending. Team members whisper. Cameras are everywhere. Journalists are losing their voices trying to cover every angle. The Mercedes garage has become a fortress. Closed doors, limited access, silent engineers moving like they're preparing a machine that doesn't just go fast, it declares war. Lewis Hamilton has returned. Not just as a driver. Not just as a 7-time world champion. But as a force. As a memory that refuses to fade. As a presence that makes every other driver question their trajectory. Dressed in the iconic black and silver, he steps into the paddock like a monarch returning from exile, not to reclaim a throne, but to reinvent the entire kingdom. There's no press conference. No smiles. No small talk. Just purpose. Cold, calculated purpose. This isn't about points. This isn't about strategy. This is about reminding the world why legends are dangerous when underestimated. This is about rewriting the final chapter in his own ink. The era of doubt is over. The message is simple: you forgot who I was. Watch me remind you, every single lap. Meanwhile, George Russell walks like a man navigating a collapsing world. His posture's different. No grin. No camera-ready charm. Just a blank stare into the middle distance. He hasn't spoken publicly. He hasn't posted. Not even a cryptic emoji. But in this silence, the world hears everything. Whispers in the paddock suggest tension. Some say he crossed an unspoken line with Toto. Others believe he tried to push for a team takeover, only for it to backfire catastrophically. There's talk of a dinner in Vienna weeks ago. Lewis, Toto, and Susie. 3 hours. No phones. Total blackout. Whatever happened in that room shattered the old hierarchy and reforged an alliance stronger than ever before. Insiders claim Toto never truly moved on from Hamilton. That every race since 2021 has been a test of loyalty and timing. And when the moment came, when the stars aligned, he didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. Not just to bring back Lewis, but to send a message. A message to Red Bull. To Ferrari. To Russell. To everyone. This isn't just about racing anymore. It's about revenge, loyalty, destiny. It's about a team refusing to die quietly. About a driver who has nothing left to prove, except to those who dare to doubt him. The grid hasn't just been shaken. It's been remade. The foundations of Formula One have shifted under our feet. Every team is scrambling. Every strategist is second-guessing. Every driver is sweating. Because now, the lion is awake. The storm is here. And the only thing more terrifying than a legend returning is a legend returning with unfinished business. Formula One has always been a sport of speed, precision, and legacy. But this is an uprising. A revolution wrapped in carbon fiber. And it's only just begun.